Alright, hello, my name is Sarah, and if we haven't met, that is completely normal because this is the internet. I'm here, I'm talking about books today, as always, as I have been, and if you don't know me, welcome, and if you do, I'm very glad that you're back to hear me ramble about books again. That seems to be a thing now. I'm in the Philippines still, which is very amazing. However, it's the end, it's nearing the end, and I thought that I wouldn't get books here. I actually packed a suitcase full of books because I didn't know if I was going to stay longer than 3 months. As in, you never know, you know? Why don't you just stay a couple months longer? Who knew? There were so many things I did not know. And when you don't know your context, what's going to happen, what you're going to be in the mood for reading, I decided to travel with a little suitcase full of books, which is quite an extravagance. But since we have 2 kids and they're like a full fare price, you know, to fly with, they get like a lot of kilos to travel with. So I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna get my books with me, and so that I have the opportunity to choose what I could read when I need to. As I predicted, my moods are very volatile, and so many books that I had promised to myself that I wanted to read here, I actually have, but a lot of those I haven't because time is limited, and also because I got lured into the book world, into the bookstores, that is, which is surprising because I didn't plan on staying as long as I did in cities. In the Philippines, there is only sort of one chain of bookstores that serves, let's say, a worldly reader, and before that it was National Bookstore, but they didn't really have much options. And then Fully Booked appeared. I don't really know the history of Fully Booked. It's a great name for a bookstore, but Fully Booked is the only bookstore chain where you can find interesting reads, where you can find niche books, where you can find bestsellers, obviously. And it's great. It's great. I do recommend, if you're in the Philippines and you want some books and you want to go to a bookstore, go there. But of course, they're in the city. So I went to Manila, and I went to Cebu, and I went to Iloilo. Those are like 3 major cities in the Philippines, among others. And I could not resist the temptation to just go check it out. And I was very tempted, especially in Manila, because Manila is actually one of the biggest ones. There's one of the biggest ones there. And surprisingly, that's where I found the least interesting options. Granted, I didn't have that much time because my kids were sticking around and I was, limited in my explorations, particularly for nonfiction, that I thought there was some interesting things over there. But it was actually in the one in Iloilo, which is super surprising. It's a tiny city. It's where I was born, but it's a tiny city. Well, not so tiny, actually. It grew quite a lot, but it used to be a tiny city that grew quite a lot. There's millions of people that live there, and there is now 2 Fully Books. There's a tiny one, and there's a bigger one, and they're not that big. But there, I found my favorite, one of, my new favorite authors, and I found very interesting reads. So I want to talk about the books that I got in the Philippines here. I only read 3 of those, which I talked about in my previous video of the February and January wrap up. So I only read 3 of those books, which is actually a good thing. That means that I didn't get lured to the new books easily, even though I've been wanting to read them and fooling myself that I will ever have the time to read all of them. But you know what? I prefer to continue that illusion. I think one day I will really give myself a full hard stop about just being too tempted to get some new books, and also because my wallet does not like it at all. But I'm a writer, so also when you write, it's part of the learning. So it's me investing in my learning. Okay, so there are 3 books that I read from there, which is Fair Play by Tove Jansson and The Art Thief by Michael Finkel, that I found in Iloilo. They were great. I love this. I love that. If you haven't seen the video of the book reviews, it's just the previous one. Go check it out. This is really a really good find for me because now I really want to read all of her books. I love her prose. I love her style. She's amazing. She's just amazing. I actually made the mistake of saying she was a Swedish author. No, she's a Finnish author, but apparently she also wrote in Swedish. So thank you to whoever called me out on that, but I'm thankful now that I know. Those I found in Iloilo. This was something that I was looking for, actually, so I was really surprised when I found it. And this is just something I saw. I love the editions of the New York Review of Books, so every time I see any of those books, I always just curiously pick it up because they have a really unique, they kind of, revivify some classics that you didn't really hear about, or things that are a bit more niche perhaps, that maybe the mainstream reader doesn't know, and I always love to learn more about new authors that I don't know. And it's introduced by Ali Smith, so I was quite tempted because I love Ali Smith. I've only read one book of hers, which is Artful, but I love that book, and so I trust her taste. And The Art Thief, of course, which is brilliant, but I'm not gonna linger on that. So I actually got a few books that are very, 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 very famous. I got Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami, which I've actually read before, but that was 10 years ago, and I don't really remember much. And I also think that I didn't finish it. I don't know why. I heard it was great, and I love this kind of nostalgia, looking back at the past relationships kind of vibe, big city life, loneliness, the shebang. And what's interesting is that I love Haruki Murakami's books, but this is a very different book of his. A lot of people start with this and then don't like his other books, which makes sense and which is normal, because Norwegian Wood is I think his only kind of realistic book where it doesn't go really into any magical realism. And I think I would love this at the right time. I actually started it at some point, but then I thought, I don't know why, I don't know, it wasn't the moment. But if you don't know it, this is the blurb. Toru, a quiet and preternaturally serious young college student in Tokyo, is devoted to Naoko, a beautiful and introspective young woman, but their mutual passion is marked by the tragic death of their best friends years before. Toru begins to adapt to campus life and the loneliness and isolation he faces there, but Naoko finds the pressures and responsibilities of life unbearable. As she retreats further into her own world, Toru finds himself reaching out to others and drawn to a fiercely independent and sexually liberated young woman. A poignant story of one college student's romantic coming of age, Norwegian Wood takes us to that distant place of a young man's first hopeless and heroic love. And I feel like we all have that sort of story or relationship within us that we long to go back to, or sort of stay in the memory. And it's, I mean, at least for me, a hopeless romantic that likes to romanticize the past, or at least I used to. I don't think I romanticize it as much as I used to, but this sort of novel that looks back at what shaped us, for me, is really nice. So I want to reread this eventually. Another one that you will probably know about is, I mean, it sold a lot, so actually I think most of you will probably know this, 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. Somehow I missed this whole trend. I just missed these whole books. I didn't even know about this until I found it at the bookstore, and I realized that everybody around me knew it and had read it at some point. And I really want to read this, particularly since Afghanistan has, gotten into a very tumultuous political state. Women don't have rights, they can't go to school, it's been horrible, and I want to learn more about their culture, and through a novel, I think that's kind of the most visceral way that you can learn what it's like for certain people in certain places. And I'm very interested also in novels that are really set in a specific time and place, and how the context and the political environment and the culture shapes a human being and shapes characters. And so I'm very curious. Mariam is only 15 when she is sent to Kabul to marry Rashid. Nearly 2 decades later, a friendship grows between Mariam and a local teenager, Laila, as strong as the ties between mother and daughter. When the Taliban take over, life becomes a desperate struggle against starvation, brutality, and fear. Yet, love can move a person to act in unexpected ways and lead them to overcome the most daunting obstacles with a startling heroism. So, the Daily Telegraph said Hosseini has that rare thing, a Dickensian knack for storytelling. A masterful narrative, he is a storyteller of dizzying power, and I want a book to sweep me, to take me to hold my consciousness captive and make me forget that I'm reading. And I think we all seek that in books. But I think that the hardest part about reading a lot, or really, choosing a life of a constant reader, and of choosing to dedicate your life to literature and to studying and reading books and even writing, is that it gets a bit harder to get lost in the narrative because you're thinking constantly about the shape of the story and the characters and how they're crafted, and you know, to suspend your disbelief, it requires so much more. And I feel like this will completely sweep me over. There's something I trust sometimes with like internationally, there's something I trust about ultra bestsellers, is that if they really have swept so many readers, then I'm sure that that means it's easy to give yourself to the story, that it lends itself to, you know, absorbing you and to be taken. And that's, for me, that's precious, and that's why I feel like I should read this book sooner rather than later, because there's, you know, it's kind of like my medicine. Sometimes I'm really like, life sucks. I need to escape, and this for me is the best escape. This is better than movies and everything, and I'm betting a lot on this one. Let me know if you think I'm wrong to do so. But so far, the people who I have asked if they have read it, and they have said that this was one of the best books that they have read. So yeah, next I got this in Cebu, What Are You Going Through by Sigrid Nunez. Now, I have read a few Nunez books. I have read A Feather on the Breath of God, beautiful title. I have read The Friend. And I think I read something else, but I'm not sure. Maybe I haven't. Maybe it's just those two. And I love her writing. No, I think I read an essay of her. She is a teacher. I think she teaches writing, but she is also an amazing author. I have loved her books so far. They're very introspective. I think that Susan Sontag was one of her mentors. She wrote a book about Susan Sontag, and she's very introspective. She really sort of, with her stories, she really dissects certain elements of life, or what it is like to, you know, be alive in this specific moment of history. So it's very contemporary, and the reason why I picked this one, because we are doing sort of book club with some friends where we watch movies. Well, that's actually the first time. We did it last time when Claire Keegan's book adaptation came out, from Small Things Like These with Cillian Murphy. We decided to watch the movie at the cinema and then do a book club of the book to then compare the movie and the book, and then have some other dimension to talk about. And we love Claire Keegan. So I thought that we would do the same thing with this, because it turns out that Almodovar, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I'm not mistaken because my memory sometimes bugs, but I think he made a movie recently that is partly based on this novel. And I think it's his English debut, and that he hasn't had a film out in a long time, and it looks really interesting. And the premise of the movie, I think, is two friends. So a friend that goes through her friend's cancer with her and helps her and tries to be a listening ear and be there for her friend that has cancer. And I think this is a part of the book. I don't know if it's a big part of the book, I don't know if it's a small part of the book, but it was based on this book partly. So the blurb is: a woman describes a series of encounters she has with various people in the ordinary course of her life. An ex she runs into by chance at a public forum, an Airbnb owner unsure of how to interact with her guests, a stranger who seeks help comforting his elderly mother, a friend from her youth now hospitalized with terminal cancer. That's the part. In each of these people, the woman finds a common need, the urge to talk about themselves and to have an audience to their experiences. The narrator orchestrates this chorus of voices for the most part as a passive listener, until one of them makes an extraordinary request, drawing her into an intense and transformative experience of her own. In What Are You Going Through, Sigrid Nunez brings wisdom, humor, and insight to a novel about human connection and the changing nature of relationships in our times. This I'm really interested about, the changing nature of relationships in our times, because I feel like there's something wrong with how we are interacting with one another. So lonely yet so connected, you know what I mean? Anyway, a surprising story about empathy and the unusual ways one person can help another through hardship. Nunez offers a moving and provocative portrait of the way we live now. So yeah, this sounds very good. I love that. This is the kind of book where maybe nothing really happens in terms of plot. This is definitely the kind of book that feels like it's more about the inner life of a character or characters, and exploring through the metaphor of these connections and the conversations that she has with these people, exploring the nature of love and of friendship, and maybe that's just one and the same thing, right? So I am very excited to read this. The Friend that I've read of hers has won the National Book Award, and that was great. There was also mainly a book about writing. It was like about a person who had to take care of the dog of her deceased mentor, and so she has to take care of this Great Dane, and so it's her friendship with this dog and how she relates the friendship with this dog with the owner who was the mentor that has died. It's really interesting, and the writing is so precise and so beautiful, and I'm sure I'll love this. Another book that I have not read, actually all of these books I have not read. The only other books that I have read that I don't have with me is Olga Tokarczuk's book, The Impartial, which I also reviewed last video, which I didn't really like. In that video I was like, yeah, I don't think it's the book and it's just me. But now that I think about it, I actually think it's a book. But you know, who am I to say? Now, this is a very Filipino book in the sense that it's written by a Filipino artist, or no, a Filipino writer. I think she is based in the States. She might be part of the diaspora, but I don't know at all. And this is the kind of book, you know, that I saw, the Balikbayan Artist. Balikbayan is a specifically Filipino term. I only know it from Balikbayan boxes, where basically if you move to the Philippines, or if you send stuff to the Philippines, you put it in this Balikbayan box and you stuff it with stuff. It's just that you have to pay for the box, I think, just the box, if I'm not mistaken. And this is really interesting because it looks at a time period that I'm very interested about, and a context that I'm very interested about, which is basically the gold rush, I believe, in the west of the US states. And so I learned through East of Eden by John Steinbeck that there was a bunch of Chinese immigrants that were working really hard, there in the West, that were paid really badly and that were just working, kind of slaving off. And apparently there were also Filipino ones, which is not surprising. And this is about that. So it's written by Aileen R. Tabios, I suppose. A tale of the artist's role in troubled times set amid a dictatorship. She might be alluding to the Marcos dictatorship, but let us find out. From a laborer turned artist, Vance Igorta returns to the Philippines as a Balikbayan after nearly 50 years in the United States. He is a member of the Manong generation, the largest diaspora of Filipinos, it's a thing, who worked physically demanding jobs, mostly in California's agricultural fields. The Balikbayan Artist, inspired and dedicated to Venancio C. Igarta. So it's a real guy! Okay, the real-life leading artist of the Manong generation takes readers from the early 20th century to the present day, when Vance Igorta's art is being discovered anew. Super interesting. Igarta's legacy is validated for allowing his art to address the tensions of his time instead of keeping it solely entrenched in aesthetic concerns. The artist's choice reflects what he learned as a voraciously self-educated person, that in circumstances where power corrupts, what makes anyone and everyone dangerous is love. That sounds super Filipino, because I don't know if you guys know, but the history of the Philippines is quite interesting. You probably don't know. But basically, there was a dictator once, Marcos. My mom, when she was a child or a teenager, I think, lived under martial law. She's been telling me stories of hiding in the marshes and having to stay underwater and breathe through a bamboo pole or whatever to hide from the military. I don't know what she did. Apparently she went to prison. I didn't question her that much. I probably should. But that was a thing. That was really brutal. And there was a giant revolution at some point. People, woke up. People wanted to topple the dictator. And there was a giant, march called the EDSA Revolution, where there were millions of people in Manila in the EDSA Avenue. It's called the EDSA Avenue. And what was very unique about this revolution is that it has managed to overthrow a dictator through a very loving, peaceful protest of millions of people. There were a lot of priests and nuns and just civilians, children. They were singing, they were dancing, they were giving flowers to the military, they were uniting the people. which is something I think we maybe should look into in terms of successful revolution. So that's why I say that the power of love being dangerous, as is mentioned in the blurb, is very Filipino, because they really believe that with love, and like it was very Christian and religious, and they really believed that they could do a lot just with that force, that they would unite in their love, and they actually have, and it's fascinating history. Like if you look at the archives and the photos and all that, I find it amazing. So I'm very excited to read the Balikbayan Artist. Yes, it's one of these books that I look on Goodreads and there's like no reviews at all, because it's probably very niche. Even though it's published by Penguin, probably didn't make a lot of sales, but I love to be one of those readers of something as special as this. And you know what? I'm sure it's pretty good. Oh, there's another book as well that I don't have. What's it called? It's a very oh yes, so it's the book of Jose Rizal, Noli Me Tangere, which is a book originally written in Filipino. He basically started the revolution with the Filipinos against the Spaniards way back. He was educated in Spain, and then he wrote a book about, the struggle of the Filipino at the time, and the people read it and they were like, we need to revolt against the Spaniards, against the colonizers, and they did. And he wrote that novel has been recently retranslated, I believe, in English. Let me find the blurb. Title translation is Touch Me Not, and this has a lot of good reviews on Goodreads, like 4.22 average, 8,395 ratings. In more than a century since its appearance, Jose Rizal's Noli Me Tangere has become widely known as the great novel of the Philippines, a passionate love story set against the ugly political backdrop of repression, torture, and murder. The Noli, as it is called in the Philippines, was the first major artistic manifestation of Asian resistance to European colonialism, and Rizal became a guiding conscience and martyr for the revolution that would subsequently rise up in the Spanish province. Very interesting. Ever since this revolution, a lot of shit has gone. A lot of shit has gone fire. Everything happened. So many things happened after that. The Japanese were here. The Chinese were here. The Japanese kind of were horrible. They were really bad. That was during World War II. The Japanese tortured a bunch of Filipinos. The Americans came in as the saviors, which explains a little bit a specific relationship between the Filipinos and what they perceive as better, which is Western. Probably because the Americans came in as the saviors. But then again, there's an American genocide here in the Philippines, which is a lesser known part of the history, but the records are there. And I'm not going to go blabber on about that. I just find that Filipino history is really interesting, and I thought I really needed to buy books that I could read to connect more with my heritage, my country, so that I could just learn more about it and feel like I kind of understand it a bit more. And mostly I'm interested in pre-colonial Philippines, which there's much less traces of and archives of, because of course it's hard to get by those archives. But I know some people are doing the work. They're starting to sort of think about decolonization, whatever that means. I'm not an expert, but I just find it interesting. So the next book that I got this one in Manila. All these other books I got in Manila. One of them is Salman Rushdie's Languages of Truth. I've never read him. Shame on me. I feel like I should, because he's quite a prominent figure in literature. And he's alive today, so I want to read him. This is essays. It's basically literary criticism, and judging from the title, Languages of Truth, is probably about language, about stories, about how stories shape us, about the importance of stories, about other people's stories, probably. One quote of the book is, "The act of falling in love with a book or story changes us in some way. Which are the books that you truly love? The answer will tell you a lot about who you presently are." Well, if you actually put my favorite books together in a party, it would be a pretty wild party. If they were people, and it might be pretty bleak and heavy. Composed of insightful and inspiring nonfiction, essays, criticism, and speeches. Oh, so it's a bunch of things together that focus on his relationship with the written word. Languages of Truth chronicles the dazzling brilliance of Salman Rushdie and his intellectual engagement with a period of momentous historical and cultural shifts. That's right now. In this volume are Rushdie's most piercingly analytical views on the evolution of literature and culture He explores what the work of authors from Shakespeare and Cervantes to Samuel Beckett and Toni Morrison means to him, both on the page and in person. Delves into the nature of storytelling as a human need and celebrates the malleability of language and the creative lines that can join art and life. Vibrant, searing, and expansive, this is an exhilarating tour of Rushdie's fearless imagination, a book that solidifies his place as one of the most original thinkers of our time. Well, this is very dense, but I love this topic. About writing, about stories, I'm all for it. So, Languages of Truth. What made me get this one is not only just because I was interested, but literally the 3 reviews that are highlighted on Goodreads, I think, say something like, this was my favorite book of the year, this was my favorite book of the year, like this is everybody's new favorite book. And since I'm always looking for my next favorite book, I was like, I also want it to be my next favorite book. I also want a new favorite book. I always want a new favorite book. This one is very famous as well, but I didn't expect to want to read it. It's Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. There's so much mixed reviews about this book. I heard because a lot of people, it's kind of like, I think, A Little Life, where a lot of people say it's just kind of emotional manipulation. A lot of people say, because there's a lot of bad stuff happening, apparently, and a lot of people say it was just a really, really good story. And I have recently learned that I love generational sagas. Like, I didn't really think that I liked that at some point. I don't know why. Probably it was at the period where I kind of wanted to forget about the notions of family, and I was like, I don't want to think about family, whatever. But now I find it really compelling I find it really compelling because the times are changing so fast, and I can see that, my values are so different from my parents' values in the sense, well, it's not super different, but there's so many things that contribute to a shift in conscience, to a shift in everything. And it's crazy just from a sort of different context and from values and culture that is changing constantly. And right now it's arguably changing as faster than it used to, faster and faster, you could say. And I have kids of my own, so I'm also wondering, how culture shapes a person, especially how culture shapes sort of parenting in a way, and how everything is really like, every interaction and everything is sort of shaped by your relationship with your parents or non-relationship with them, and your relationship with them is also, it has to be contextualized within your parents' cultural background as well. And historical events happen at such a pace, and we go from authoritarianism to freedom to too much freedom to back to authoritarianism. It seems like that is the human cycle of things and politics and whatnot. And everything today is so dependent on politics. Everything today is seemingly way more interconnected because of technology and because of so many things. This is not at all about the book, but that's just why I'm interested in generational sagas. And I don't know. I do wanna read it. I do wanna find out whether people were just resentful of the fact that it was a good book. I don't know. A friend of mine recently read A Little Life. I never read it, but he read it, and I was like, so is it really, like, what do people say? What's the word they use? Porn, something? Misery porn, something like that. And then he was like, man, it was just a good book, that's all. And he liked it, apparently, so I'm very curious if you have read it. What do you think? And for those of you who haven't read it, Pachinko is, in Min Jin Lee's best-selling magisterial epic, 4 generations of a poor, proud immigrant family fight to control their destinies, exiled from a homeland they never knew. In the early 1900s, teenage Sunya, the adored daughter of a crippled fisherman, falls for a wealthy stranger at the seashore near her home in Korea. He promises her the world, but when she discovers she is pregnant and that her lover is married, she refuses to be bought. Instead, she accepts an offer of marriage from a gentle, sickly minister passing through on his way to Japan. But her decision to abandon her home and to reject her son's powerful father sets off of a dramatic saga that will echo down through the generations. It sounds really good. Richly told and profoundly moving, Pachinko is a story of love, sacrifice, ambition, and loyalty. From the best-selling street markets to the halls of Japan's finest universities to the pachinko parlors. That's where we get it from. Of the criminal underworld, Lee's complex and passionate characters, strong, stubborn women, devoted sisters and sons, fathers shaken by moral crisis, survive and thrive against the indifferent arc of history. That's what I was talking about. The indifferent arc of history. Things just keep happening. Things just happen. Things just are flowing the way they're flowing. It makes you question, does free will exist? Who are we? Are we agents with power to do something, to change anything? Are we conditioned solely by our context and how we were raised, the culture we grew up in? Or do we actually have some sort of agency in things? And can we actually change the course of history? Or are we doomed to perpetual cycles? And that's amazing. That's super interesting. The last book that I got was recently longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction, and I love that because every year they choose a book and that book is amazing. They just choose great books. I do wonder whether I like this one though, and I'll tell you why in a bit. It's called Good Girl by Aria Aber. There's so many ways you can pronounce the name. But anyway, so apparently she's a poet and this is her debut novel. In Berlin's artistic underground where techno and drugs fill warehouses still pockmarked from the wars of the 20th century, 19-year-old Nila at last finds her tribe. Born in Germany to Afghan parents, raised in public housing, graffitied with swastikas, drawn to philosophy, photography, and sex, Nila has spent her adolescence disappointing her family while searching for her voice as a young woman and artist. And this is why I picked up this book, because it felt really familiar. Loved to party, loved philosophy, but anyway, I will continue. Then in the haze of Berlin's legendary nightlife, Nila meets Marlowe, an American writer whose fading literary celebrity opens her eyes to a life of personal and artistic freedom. But as Nila finds herself pulled further into Marlowe's controlling orbit, ugly, barely submerged racial tensions begin to roil Germany and Nila's family and community. Ooh, that's super contemporary. After a year of running from her future, Nila stops to ask herself the most important question: what does she want to be? A story of love and family, raves and Kafka, staying up all night and surviving the mistakes of youth. Good Girl is the virtuosic debut novel by a celebrated young poet and now a major new voice in fiction. She was born and raised in Germany and now lives in the United States. So there are many reasons why I find this very attractive and appealing. One is characters that are driven by philosophy, literature, and things like that, driven by their passions and their emotions. So partying, sex, drugs, rock and roll. I love that shit, especially the techno sort of background. What I'm scared about is that sometimes when you are in that scene, when you are living that life, you do come across some really strange characters, some really strange people who say really stupid stuff. And if you sort of craft a scene of what it's really like to go out in that, in that context, it can be boring and it can be a bit tedious to read about, especially if the character is a teenager. Mostly because I'm scared that it will remind me too much about my own teenage years and my own immature past self, which is a perpetual thing, I suppose. But yes, and also I'm tired of characters, and especially narrators, who complain a lot, who are sort of bleak, but without, nihilistic. And I don't know if this is the case with this one, but it was the case for Eva Baltasar's trilogy. I loved the first one, but then the second one I never really loved that format, It was about a disenchanted young lesbian who moves to Brussels, and I usually like this kind of premise, this kind of exploration of these themes, but when it's too much like life is pointless. Why do you write a book? Why should I read a book about someone that keeps saying life is pointless? But I don't think it will be the case for this one, because it's been selected for the long list of the International Women's Prize, and it also explores racial tensions, which is very prevalent today, not just in Germany, but everywhere in Europe. Very big phobia of Arabs, for example. I know that in the States, it's also there. It's everywhere. Everywhere right now there are tensions, and shit does go down with the police, with raves, full of drama, and it feels very important to read books like this right now. And also, raves and Kafka got me. I was like, I want to read a book about raves and Kafka. Somehow those two things in the same sentence just rang so enticing, if you know what I'm saying. Anyway, that was it. This was my Philippines book haul. And yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with my choice. I wonder if you've read any of these. If you have, please tell me with what to start with. I want someone to give me a sign that I should start reading this, for example, or reading whatever. I guess that's all, folks. I just wanted to say before we're going, you guys, please check out the links for my Substack. I'm gonna relaunch it pretty soon, probably in the middle of next year. In the middle of 2025, around the summer, maybe before the summer. I'm going to relaunch that, hopefully before, but I think it's it's more realistic to say for later. In there, I'm going to be talking about the same stuff that I ramble about, but in shorter bursts. I'm not going to write long essays. I want to write really bite-sized stuff that you can consume in 5 minutes. You know, like a quote from a book, and a thought, and an opinion. If you like my opinions, you should go ahead and subscribe to that Substack that I will link down below. I don't have a name yet. I think I don't have I think there's a name there, but I will relaunch it, so things might change. But I would love to see you over there if you are interested in my writing as well. And yeah, that's all. If you like these videos, please do subscribe. It's better if there's a bigger party in here, so we can keep talking about more books, especially in the comment section. I love that. I'll see you soon. Probably not in the tropics anymore, sadly, but nonetheless, I'll see you soon.